Major Spoilers podcast covers news, reviews, and of course, spoilers, and goes into details about the topics discussed. So if you haven't read, listened, or watched the items we talk about, you might want to come back later.
This week on the Major Spoilers podcast, I sit down and chat with Radiant Black co-creator Kyle Higgins about the upcoming issues from Image Comics, and we talk about what's next for the Massive Verse. Then, Matthew, Rodrigo, and I continue our look at the Energon Universe as we take a peek under the hood of Transformers Volume 1. You're listening to issue 1110 of the Major Spoilers podcast. It's more than meets the eye. Kyle Higgins is joining us today from the Massive Verse. Kyle, thanks for joining us.
Oh, yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So I know you've got this big, it's not a relaunch, but it's the new chapter in Radiant Black coming up in a month or so. But one of the things that really surprises me is there was a time period about 10 years ago. I don't know. I've been doing this for almost 20 years now. And there was a time like 10 years ago or so where I just got so wrapped up in, I'm going to download and watch every independent, every low budget, every superhero movie I can find. And I stumbled across this short film called The League. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. This is cool. And just kind of slipped my mind just because of the nature of time and busy doing other things. And I never aligned up that the director writer of The League was also the same person who was the writer for Nightwing, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and then, of course, Radiant Black when it kicks off. And so then as I'm going deeper into reading more of Radiant Black, suddenly I'm like, oh, here's Cal. Oh, that ties into the League. Oh, that's the same Kyle Higgins. So your start is more in movies than it ever was in comic books.
Yeah. That's totally true. It's funny because I never really wanted to make comic books, save for a period when I was in high school for I feel like a couple years where I was drawing a lot. But the thing is, like, I've loved comic books my entire life, and I've loved superheroes just as much. And so, like, I grew up, I was born in '85, so I was like 7 years old when X-Men the Animated Series came out, which was like a huge gateway for me. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, Batman the Animated Series and every live-action superhero thing that was out there. I mean, Burton's Batman, I wasn't allowed to see when it came out because I was like 4, and I think I saw it. I think I ended up seeing Batman Returns before I actually saw officially Burton's Batman.
Wow.
Or Batman '89. I guess they're both Burton's Batman. I probably would have been like, I don't know, 8 or 9 by that point. But like Richard Donner's Superman was like a really, really big deal for me. And then many years later, I actually interned for Dick and the Donner's company and Tom Mankiewicz, who wrote the original Superman. I mean, really, like what became the shooting drafts of 1 and 2 before he and Dick were fired off of 2 by the Salkinds. Tom ended up becoming my mentor while I was at Chapman University, and he was teaching there, and I was basically his TA while I was making the League there. And so I actually have next to my desk here, I have this one sheet that Tom gave me after I graduated for Superman 77, and after he passed away in 2010, I actually reached back out to the Donner's company and asked if Dick would sign it for me. And so it says, Kyle, hope to sign your DGA card, Richard Dick Donner. And that was like actually one of the biggest joys for me, is that when I did make the League, the whole reason behind it, I mean, there's a lot, but I don't want to bore people too much getting into the weeds, but essentially when I decided at film school, like, I'm going to take a really big swing and I want to make the type of short film that could be a calling card and be something that might be able to open up other doors for me as a director coming out of film school. Because this was 2007, 2008 when I graduated. And so we were still in the era where with the right kind of big short film, you could actually get opportunities as a director for features. And so this was also the era where like things like Sandy Calora's, Batman Dead End short film was coming out, and that really cool Grayson
Yep.
trailer. And the Bat and the Sun guys had done some stuff.
Mhm.
And so people were doing all these fan films, and it always clocked for me a little bit as a like kind of a false path though, because I felt like no matter how good your Batman fan film is, it's not going to stand up in comparison to, a big studio Batman film. And so
Sure.
it's very unlikely that you're going to be hired to direct the next Batman feature because you did a really cool Batman fan film, right?
Mhm.
And then on top of that, like, Sandy and those guys were getting like, I feel like millions of views and downloads. I mean, this was pre-YouTube or just into the transition of YouTube.
Yeah.
It's like, but what can you really do with that? Like, because you don't have the rights to Batman,
Mhm.
So I looked at that and was like, well, I want to build out my own thing. And in order to take the swing, I want to go back to the genre that made me fall in love with movies, and that was superheroes. And so I figured if I'm going to spend the next however many years like killing myself to pull out all the stops and try to do this really, really ambitious short film, especially for a film school project, I want to do something in the genre that, I love. And I figured there's no guarantee I'll ever be in a position to be able to direct a big superhero movie. So I figured I'm going to do it now. And that became the starting point for building out the League, which was, for those who don't know, it's a 30-minute superhero noir. It's about the superhero labor union in 1960 Chicago. So it's there's a lot of Mad Men to it. There's a lot of certainly you get comped to Watchmen anytime you do anything that feels deconstructive-y.
Yeah.
I feel like it's much more New Frontier in some ways, but with, like I said, like a lot of noir overtones. And that movie, I mean, it almost killed me. It was crazy, ambitious.
I'm curious, once the League was done, did you, because there's many years between the League and Cowl,
Mhm.
did you just say, I'm done with this, this was my thing, and I've accomplished it? Or were you always like, in my back pocket, I'm going to use this to launch, a massive verse?
Not that directly, but there was a lot going on behind the scenes. We put the League out in 2008, and that email that that I mentioned that Joe Quesada wrote me, what I left out was that in my response, or after I said, if you're ever looking for new writers, to please let me know, Joe responded to that. And he said, well, we're always looking for new writers, Kyle. He goes, what kinds of stories and superheroes do you like, or are you interested in?
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote back with a bunch of things. But one of the things I also flagged was, I was like, and by the way, I was like, well, it's like my dream. Like, I would love to do, there's the League, like doing more in this world. I would love. And, Joe wrote back and was like, well, we can't really do that because that would be creator owned, and we don't do a ton of creator owned at Marvel.
Mm-hmm.
There's like the Icon line that they had.
Yeah.
And he was like, and that's really more for like, Marvel exclusive creators, and certainly creators of a certain pedigree. So that's not going to really be a fit, well, which of course. But after doing the first Captain America issue, I met an art agent named Eduardo Alpuente, because it was his artist, Agustin Padilla, who drew the Captain America one shot. And Eduardo Alpuente and I would speak on GChat a lot, and I was like, I really want to do Alec Siegel, who co-created the League with me and wrote it. It's my best friend from, since high school.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Alec and I was telling Eduardo, I was like, we would love to do more. Like, we want to do a creator-owned comic of the League. So in its first kind of iteration, it was actually a different artist of Eduardo's, another client of his, who we were working with on sample pages. And those sample pages that we then had colored and lettered and everything, I was shopping those pages around as a pitch to different publishers. And, Eduardo asked me if, he's like, well, do you know anyone at DC? Because they obviously have Vertigo and other, it was really Vertigo at that time as a creator-owned kind of pathway. And I was like, no, I don't know anyone at DC. I would love to meet someone over there, though. He's like, oh, why don't I introduce you to my friend Mike Martz? And I was like, Mike Martz, you mean the Batman group editor? And he goes, yeah. I said, if that's not too big an ask, I would be so grateful. That would be amazing. And so he sent an email introducing me to Mike Martz. And that's Mike's why I ended up on the Batman books. Like Mike brought me in, and it all came out of this kind of pitch for doing a creator-owned version of the League. Fast forward a couple years, and I'm writing Nightwing. I'm writing Deathstroke, or I think I was fired off Deathstroke by that time. But like I was doing a lot of monthly books and trying to figure out how to do this for a living and become a consistent writer while also navigating the politics of that era of writing at DC for the New 52, which was that could be its own other podcast. Like very interesting but challenging time, especially to be a new and young writer coming up in.
You're saying that maybe it was in the back of your mind or whatever, building over time, you're trying to look for these connections. But that's one of the things that I really liked about what we're seeing in Radiant Black and, all the other spinoff series that are part of the Massiveverse, is that you're able to just slide these things in really subtly. For example, when Nathan is learning to use his powers and you're shooting cowl action figures, right? In one of the early issues. And it's like, oh, wait, this makes complete sense now. But I will say you also have a great knack for turning the trope on its ear. And when Radiant Black first started, Image is like, hey, check out Radiant Black. This is going to be a big thing. And we were super hyped here at Major Spoilers to review it on our Dueling Review podcast, mainly because I knew, this is the same Kyle Higgins that was over at Power Rangers. And my friend Matthew and I are going through the first couple of issues over the couple of months that it's released. And we're both like, is this Kyle doing his own Power Rangers thing? There's a black one and there's a red one. And we were just totally convinced. And then suddenly, no, we're going to kill the hero halfway. We're into issue 3 or 4 when that happens. And we're like, I think he's doing something completely different here, but with that familiar tone to it, but something completely different. So I would say that you mentioned earlier that you took a big swing at times doing, reshoots or going in and just doing the ambition of the League. And I actually had that written down in my pre-notes before we sat down to talk, is that Kyle takes big swings because doing what you did with the first start of Radiant Black, giving the impression that it's one thing and then it suddenly becomes something else. And then as people start to read through the series, it's like, oh no, are you familiar with Cowl? Oh, are you familiar with the League? These are all tied in together. And then as the series builds, it's like, oh, well, we can go and do these characters. We can go follow Radiant Red, or we can go and follow Rogue Sun. And we can do a whole series on these things and still make them interconnected. And oh, by the way, we've got this book called Supermassive. And so we're going to take a big swing and try to get people on board with this. And then, drops into my email box, probably a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. We're splitting this series in two, part A and part B. And I was like, oh, this could be a disaster. This could be a major disaster because I'm not a big fan me personally, not a big fan of the 0.5 numbering system. And so when I see other publishers doing it, I'm like, I'm not sure this is a great idea to do this. And then you read part 1 and then you read part 2 and you're like, holy crap, he's done it again. He's turned those expectations on their ear and given us something different until it finally, recollides back with Supermassive 2024, which came out, several months ago. And so, taking big swings, especially with Radiant Black, you should be commended for that. And to think that it's like, again, you probably didn't think that this kind of a superhero franchise, we'll call it that, sprung out of a desire to do a superhero film in college.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you. That's all very kind. We do really pride ourselves on trying to push the boundaries on what a modern superhero comic book can be, what a comic book in general can be.
Mm-hmm.
And we're really, really big on like committing to the bit and trying to explore concepts and stories to their fullest potential. And that also can involve like interactivity, and immersion is a really big thing for us. And it's I think it really just stems from the fact that Radiant Black is a book that I like to say, like, the book's not about me, but there's a lot of me in the book.
Oh no, that's my other note is, does Kyle need therapy? Where is his trauma? And also,
how much time
many times through this, I'm also going, oh, I feel so seen in this section or in this chapter. So,
well, Eric told me one time that Robert liked to say, Kirkman liked to say that you can't pick your hits. And that always stuck with me. And so when we were designing and building Radiant Black, I very much was conscious of the fact that it's like, look, there's no guarantee. There's no way to know if this is going to work.
Right.
But I do want to set it up in a way where if it does work, I could keep doing it for many, many years without growing resentful of having to do it, And so I tried to design the book in a way where it's like, okay, like, it's not autobiographical by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm writing about a lot of my own fears. And, I set it in my hometown for that kind of reason. And you see everything from like the character's love of Cowl, which in universe turns out to be like, the events of the book Cowl happened in the 1960s, but then there was also like, we established in issue 9, there was also like in the early 2000s, which was the era when I was a teenager and was obsessed with like, and following online on like Dark Horizons and Superhero Hype and 80 Cool News and all these sites. Like, I was following every single new detail that would come out from, the first X-Men film, the production on that, and then the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films. And so there basically was a movie or movies that existed, that happened in the early 2000s that are based on the events in the 60s. And so they're Cowl films. And for Nathan and Marshall as teenagers, those movies are the equivalent of what, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man and the first 2 X-Men movies were for me. So it does end up kind of coming in as like a little bit of a stand-in here. For those who don't know, Radiant Black, I like to describe it as like, if you know Power Rangers, if you like Power Rangers, I joke that it's like Power Rangers with adult problems. But the real pitch is that it's a very contemporary superhero series about these 2 disillusioned millennials navigating failed dreams and credit card debt with the help of existential black holes and robots, giant robots.
Yeah.
And so, I should say miniature black holes and existential giant robots. But it also is kind of this love letter to and celebration of superheroes and being a fan of superheroes. And so like, I don't have the same kind of excitement and love for the things I grew up with as I now do it all professionally. And that's hard. It's a thing that people talk about a lot who become, pros in a field that they were fans of or love. Right. And it's kind of a little bit of the cost of entry of kind of giving up your fandom to some extent as you then become, a professional. But I wanted to try to create something for other people that might imbue that kind of feeling of like putting a little bit of magic back in the world in a way that like was in the spirit of the types of things that made me so excited. And I wanted to do it for right now. So that's why like we have all this interactivity. We do things with other mediums, with the secret short films, with like you say, like the dual timelines under 2 different books. To your point about the 0.5 numbering system, I don't like it either. Here's the thing about trying to do stuff outside the box. Okay. Steven, the big truth of it all is like, it's one thing to do it and execute it and do it, really, and hopefully do it really well. Right. It's another thing to teach the audience, and in this case, readers, and more importantly, retailers, what it is and how to engage with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the whole point of doing it initially, the first 2 years of the book were really a secret two-hander between the two best friends, and the powers trade off back and forth. And then at the end of issue 24, only one of them is going to be able to be Radiant Black going forward because of story and mythology reasons. And it's for the rest of their life. They have to decide. And so we actually ran a QR code in the book. It was actually in our last big Blacklight issue. There's a QR code on the last page as the robot is speaking directly to readers saying, you have to decide. We did a fan vote on who will be Radiant Black. And then issue 25 was the start of the Catalyst War event. It was going to be 6 parts. So 6, releases. And so we made both endings and put an ending where the characters chose Marshall under the A cover and an ending where the characters chose Nathan under the B cover. And we didn't really tell people that we were doing that. I reached out to about 60 retailers personally to tell them this is the secret. Yeah. And this was like a real debate that we had, which was, I had one retailer suggest like you should just do it as a flip book. And I was like, yeah, I get it. But the thing is, like, ultimately, this idea, because not only did we put out the 2 endings, but then we announced that's actually the secret of the Catalyst War, that for reasons that are integral to the story and the mythology, for the next 5 chapters, we are actually making 2 books that are completely different, following the 2 divergent timelines with 2 different art teams. And each book is following, it's either Nathan's timeline where he's Radiant Black or Marshall's timeline where he's Radiant Black. And they're 2 different books. And the idea was to use the variant cover as a storytelling mechanism itself, because I've never seen that done before. Well, it's never been done before for a reason.
No, because it can be confusing. If you see an A cover and a B cover, you're like, oh, this is just a variant, I'll skip this or whatever. Well, and then it's like, no, look, I'm missing a huge part of the story.
Well, and we had the message, we did messaging on it, but like, look, it is an incredibly hard time right now to be a retailer and to have a store. There is so much out there. There are so many books to keep track of. You have 4 different distributors. I mean, we're not even talking about the Diamond stuff right now. You have like 3 or 4 different distributors that you have to order books through now, between Penguin Random House, Diamond, Lunar. And so just keeping up with everything, much less aware of like this crazy outside the box thing, that's really, really tough. And it's asking a lot of retailers. And for that, for any retailers listening, I'm very, very sorry. We then pivoted to the 0.5 model because we just saw the numbers and we saw retailers ordering, and it was clear that they didn't understand or know, or maybe didn't like that we were trying this really ambitious, different thing. And so that's where the, it's not just 26, the A cover and the B cover. It's actually going to be 26 and 26.5, 27, 27.5. But it is definitely, I mean, look, we had a lot of delays last year as well, because this, again, was a crazy ambitious thing on top of us running the No One project, which also had the huge ARG and audio series that I was directing. Brian and I were writing everything of, and the Unreal Engine videos and all of that, right? We're doing all this at the same time. And then, without getting into it, it's like that stuff happens in life as well. And someone is going through a divorce, and I had another huge cartilage transplant in my knee and wasn't walking for like 2 months. And so we had all these delays, which didn't help it.
Yeah.
But I am so immensely proud of the story, and the collected editions we've put out, the trade paperbacks, I think really collected and presented all very, very well. Yeah. And then that's why honestly, it's why kind of we're talking right now, because we have taken, since the last issues came out in October, we've been off stands until next month with issue 31, where we come back with a big new jumping on point. It's one book. It's just the main, Radiant Black, issue number 31. And then the month after 32, etc. We're back. We're on time. We're monthly. Like, we're not going anywhere. We are very committed to the direct market. I mean, how many books can you point to right now in the landscape of comics that are independent and above issue 25 from a numbering standpoint?
There's very few. And then there's Eric Larson. So yeah.
Well, and Spawn. And I mean,
Yeah.
that's the thing is like, even Marvel and DC stuff, like stuff lasts, 12 issues at most, 18 at most these days. And then it's getting canceled or rebooted, or I hear from retailers sometimes that like very much they think there needs to be more, ongoing series, long running series in comics. And like, I'm just here to say that like, yes, like we're trying different things, but we also believe in that. And we are very committed with like Radiant Black and Rogue Sun. And in particular, it's like these books are going to keep going. Like we're going to be there month in, month out now. And, we're looking to excite people about all the stuff we've done and all the stuff we're going to be doing coming up here. And I promise there's no more 0.5 numbering.
He says that now, but from a person who would go religiously to the comic book store week after week after week to get my comic hauls, I knew that new comics were coming out, whether that be from Image or whether that be, a new Bone issue or whatever that I could look forward to. But I was always looking for surprises. And, a lot of people say, Radiant Black is the Invincible for the next generation. And again, going back to Big Swings, Robert Kirkman is really good at surprising audiences. Oh, right. I'm canceling Walking Dead without telling anybody. Oh, yes. I've brought over the Transformers and G.I. Joe line, and I'm not telling anybody, and we're secretly sticking it into Void Rivals.
Yes.
I like that you're doing that same thing, right? Whether it is killing off a hero, splitting up two different timelines and telling stories in parallel, whether that be, hey, go listen to this music soundtrack that we've created while you're reading the book, or whatever. Those kind of surprises, I think, are really, really good. And where Radiant Black left off, it could just end right there. If Radiant Black never came back after issue 30, you've got a complete story from beginning to end. And I think people will eat that up just by itself, right?
Yeah.
But to know that it's going to be ongoing, I think that then gets people more invested into this universe.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing is like now we're at a point where we have a sizable enough back catalog. I mean, on Radiant Black alone, not even talking about or touching on the larger kind of massive verse, which I'd love to talk about, in a little bit here.
Yeah.
But just on Radiant Black alone, we have enough. We have 6 volumes on this book, and we have, we've put out one big hardcover so far.
And that one's out last week. Was that what it came out?
No, that one came out in November or December, somewhere in there.
Okay.
But it's we call it our massive edition. It's book 1. So it's essentially volumes 1 and 2 plus about 40 or 45 pages of back matter. We did like 5,000 words of new interviews.
Yeah, that stuff is great. I read that last night and it is fantastic. I mean,
and we also,
for people that want to
like
look at stuff, I love that stuff.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we really went kind of all out on it, and I have to give like huge shout out and credit to Michael Basuto, who's our editor and designer, and he runs not only all the books with me in the Massiveverse, but then all the stuff we do like at Black Market Narrative, and he's an incredible designer. So he put the whole thing together. We also I had stuff relettered. I pulled, pulled some sound effects out of different sections and added a few more things to really kind of get it into it's the shape that we really, wanted it to be in. And, that even included we went in and had Rod Fernandez, who is our ongoing colorist now, as of, start of Catalyst War and everything. He came up under Marcelo Costa, who's the co-creator and illustrator of Radiant Black, one of the 2 illustrators. But Marcelo and Rod, primarily Rod, recolored all of issue 11 because it just never quite landed the way that we had wanted it to in the monthly comic and even in the trade paperbacks. And so it's things like that. We were kind of going in. It's this is the best way to read this, really kind of make it feel like a premium experience. And anyway, so we have this kind of, like I said, sizable back catalog. And so we are starting now to try to do much more of a general awareness kind of push. There's kind of, there's 2 fronts that we're talking about right now and trying to speak to, which is, existing fans and certainly retailers, as we are trying to keep everyone better informed, as well as like there are little things like inside baseball things about like making sure all the covers are out in the solicits when it's solicited, making sure messaging to retailers is really clean and clear. And also like they have copies of the books, like the PDFs early, like things like that, like things I want to get them in stores between, from posters. We just put out a 16-page story so far, recap issue for free that went to stores as a surprise in like packages of 10 or packets of 10 as a like, here's a clean, concise way to catch up if you want. Like this is the whole story of the last 3 years of Radiant Black. It's very glossy, of course, but like it's a very concise thing that also then teases, and here's some stuff coming up in 2025, and then all the ordering information on issue 31. So doing things like that on that front, but then on the general awareness front, it's like, we just put out like this, I don't cut reels, Steven, but we're starting to now. We're starting to try to put out more content that is designed to like introduce people to Radiant Black and the larger kind of Massiverse, not only as a universe, but as kind of like a publishing initiative and a superhero, world building initiative. And that includes all of this kind of interactivity. And so, everything from our Blacklight issues to the secret animated, short films that we did with Will Friedle voicing Radiant Black. And by the way, in that little short film, the Radiant Black versus Blaze cartoon, the Blaze and Grey Raven characters that are in the opening, and then, Blaze is in the rest of it. The actors voicing those two, those are the actors who played the Grey Raven and Blaze in the league 15 years ago. They came back to voice them for this. Our focus right now and this whole rebuild era is really about like Radiant Black and Rogue Sun, new jumping on points, both back on time and monthly. Again, with new jumping on points, and making things not only consistent but timely. And that's kind of like we're going to focus on that with then Infernal Girl Red Book 2 coming out this year.
Very cool.
Having said that, then in the future, yes, there are some plans to build some new things that are specifically designed for both concept and story-wise, but also format-wise, specifically designed for that very age range that you're talking about.
Okay, very cool. Now listen, you don't have to. Everybody who's one of our patrons knows I don't like to tell people what I want to do or plan to do because then the universe is like, oh no, we're not gonna do that. So I totally get that. But what can you tell us about what's coming up with the Massiverse? Yeah,
well, like I just said, like we're entering this kind of new era. We're calling it the rebuild era, and that comes out of how I was talking about Radiant Black initially, and we're calling it the Radiant Black rebuild. But it applies to the Massiverse kind of as a whole. So, what I mean by that, so like I just said, Radiant Black 31 comes out February, I think it's 26th. Our final order cutoff is February 3rd. We're getting ready to send the book, to the printer like right now. And that it's both a new jumping on point, as well as the start of a new era. So Marshall is now the permanent Radiant Black, coming out of the events of the Catalyst War and reflecting he was the winner of the fan vote that we did all the way back in issue 24. And here I wrote this little blurb up that I'll read here that describes it. So with issue 31, Marshall will enter a new era as the permanent Radiant Black, coming out of the Catalyst War and our fan vote. And having seen a timeline where everything went horribly wrong, he's determined to make the most of his second chance and become a hero that people can be proud of. He's moved to the city, found an apartment and a roommate, and is working to help Chicago recover from the robot invasion. But he's not the only player coming out of the war with something to prove. As futuristic weapons and blame spread faster than recovery efforts, Marshall is faced with enemies old and new, all looking to make a name for themselves in this divided Chicago. Marshall may want to level up, but first he'll need to keep the bottom from falling out. The war is over. Radiant Black rebuild starts here. So there's a lot for this era and what the book's going to be exploring, and the directions it's going to be going. While it is a great new jumping on point, that doesn't mean that all of the events prior, in particular the Catalyst War, like don't matter or there isn't repercussions from them. It's
Right.
actually the exact opposite. We're now figuring out, and I say we as like, Marshall and the characters and the world, everyone in this world, figuring out like what does the aftermath look like after this big, arguably it turned into ultimately a worldwide challenging event where your very idea of kind of and way of life are being questioned. And this, all the robot armies that came, that destroyed a big portion of Chicago, the wreckage of it all, like that's stuff they're trying to navigate now. But also like people's feelings about not only Radiant Black, but like all of this stuff that it has sparked are complicated. And I think when you realize that like at the end of the Catalyst War, I mean, Radiant Black almost turns into like a giant, like a black hole himself, like a giant event horizon. And it's like, oh, well, can we trust these people to protect us? Can we trust the Franklin group and the government and these weapons to protect us? Is there a little bit more of a citizen-led kind of, I don't want to say uprising, but there are a lot of different opinions on not only Radiant Black, but all of the status quo, and a lot of different new people that will be coming out of the woodwork as they're looking, all with different motivations, as they're trying to, both protect themselves and get theirs. That also includes everything from like our take on corporate interests and maybe even some ideas and groups that spread across the web of the world, who believe some things that may not be true, but could spark a very spirited reaction and group forming mentality as they are trying to show the world the truth about Radiant Black and their feelings on what happened during the Catalyst War that may borderline on that conspiracy territory. Slash maybe there's a bit of truth in there as well. I think you can probably parse in between what I'm saying.
I get it. I mean, and certainly a lot of those seeds were already planted right during the Catalyst War, right? With the United States Postal Inspection Service and some of the things that they were doing, everybody trying to get their hands on 001's weaponry and what happens to all of that. And then certainly, the big question is, there were all these aliens that got smashed up. All their parts didn't get picked up when the fleet left. What happens to all of that stuff? So that is very interesting to see what's going to happen there.
Keep in mind, there was also a whole other timeline. That's no longer there. But there was a whole other timeline.
That's the thing that I'm very much interested in exploring because, spoiler alert, a giant Akira version of Marshall shows up and is just like, I'll take that, and kind of disappears at the end. What's that all about? And is this Marshall going to end up in that same path? Or did he learn enough lessons from this timeline to not go down that dark path?
Right.
And so I'm interested to see what's coming up with that.
Well, and again, how much and what do people know about even the existence of that other timeline?
Yeah.
And then take that one step further. What do they believe about it? Much less what Radiant Black is here and could be. So there's all of that, even as Marshall's trying to level up and like be rise to the challenge and be the type of hero that he wants to be and thinks he can be, but also that he knows the world and Chicago need him to be. And all the people like Nathan who believed in him and have entrusted him with this also need him to be. But that's only going to get more challenging when the world starts to put out its feelings and opinions on what Radiant Black is and could be or could become, alluding to that kind of darker streak that you're talking about. That's going to be very challenged. That's going to be a big challenge for Marshall.
Yeah.
The other stuff that is going to be coming up, so that kicks off, like I said, Radiant Black 31. If you have never read the book or you've read some of the book, you want to catch up. We've got 2 like really great ways to do that right now, ahead of issue 31 having its final order cut off on February 3rd and then coming out on February 26th. If you go to radiant.black/ketchup, not the condiment, but ketchup, like CATCHUP. So radiant.black/ketchup, all one word there. We have the Radiant Black story so far, 16-pager, the recap. That's online digitally for free, so you can read that right there. But we're also running a sale right now for all 6 volumes of Radiant Black, or any of the 6. They're all 15% off right now. Nice. You'd be buying them directly from us, the creators, like through our Shopify storefront. And then if you're not a subscriber to Black Market News already, or that's our newsletter, when you subscribe, you get emailed. It's a free newsletter, by the way, just to make sure everyone knows that. Mm-hmm. If you subscribe to it, you get a 10% off, a one-time 10% off code sent to your email box, like immediately. That's stackable with the sale. Nice. So you basically get all 6 volumes of Radiant Black right now for 25% off. And that's everything. That's the whole run up through, issue 31 launching in February. We're going to do the same thing with Rogue Sun coming up here. Rogue Sun's final order cutoff is coming. I think it's like 2 weeks later. So it's, let's see. Rogue Sun's final order cutoff is on February 17th. And that's for issue number 25. And so, again, like Radiant Black, this is a new jumping on point. Rogue Sun, for those who don't know, I love this book. It's like a supernatural Batman Beyond with a shitty dead dad who haunts the suit. And it's like if Flash Thompson got superpowers instead of Peter Parker. Like literally the first time you meet Dylan, he's in school, like shoving a kid in a locker. Like he's a bully. Yeah. And he is then surprised to find out that his estranged father, who walked out on him and his mother when Dylan was only I think 2 years old, that dude who he's never known, turns out he's Rogue Sun, this superhero in New Orleans, and who has died in the first couple pages of Rogue Sun #1, and he has left the mantle and the powers to Dylan. The thing is, though, every time Dylan becomes Rogue Sun, the ghost of his, dead father is there with him. So he has to figure out how to have a relationship with this man who he hated his entire life, while also learning how to be a superhero and a better person. Yeah. And so the book really explores these like complex family dynamics, and at its heart, it's really about being like the child of divorce and going through all of this. Like that's really kind of like the metaphor and allegory of the series. And so starting with issue 25, Dylan's half sister, Ari, who is, she was really the one who should have become Rogue Sun. Right. But there's a not to reveal or spoil too much for those who haven't read the series, but there's a moment earlier in the run where Marcus admits why he left the powers to Dylan and not to Ari. It's because he knew whoever killed him, Marcus, because he suspected something was going on, they would be putting the next Rogue Sun at risk, and he didn't care about Dylan, but he loves Ari. Yeah. And so
that was pretty early on.
Right?
That was pretty early on in that series, because
it is. Yeah. Well, now starting with issue 25, there's a second Sunstone, and Ari is becoming a new Rogue Sun. So now Dylan is navigating this, sometimes frenemy, hot and cold, half sister, as she is becoming the new another Rogue Sun, just as some really big kind of honestly, like some big kind of like life altering, like emotional bombs are revealed here in issue 25 that really upend everything kind of Dylan thought he knew about, Marcus and his place, Dylan's place within, this family dynamic, as well as being Rogue Sun. And so that's just as like these kind of big new threats come in, and he now has to figure out how to have have a relationship with his half sister, in a way that like is going to both keep her alive, but also flourish as the type of rogue son that he knows needs to be here, just as the big kind of evil presence is getting closer and closer to invading, Earth. And that's
nice.
Character's name is Morningstar, which is where the rogue son powers actually all come from. So that's really glossy, I know, but again, like it's a jumping on point in 25. We're going to put out the story so far for Rogue Son in the next couple weeks. We're also doing something really fun with covers. So like on Radiant Black, we're doing an A cover and a B cover, which are both open to order. The B cover is actually for issues 31 through 36. It's actually a connecting set, all drawn by Ricardo Ribaldo.
Okay.
What I mean by open order is like a store can order as many copies as they want of the covers.
Okay.
And then the C cover is going to be a 1 in 25. And they're going to be all foil. So the 1 in 25 cover is foil, and we're getting like some heavy hitters on these. So like Jock is doing one, Rose Besh is doing one, Michael Cho is doing one, Matt Taylor is doing one. We've got some pretty killer, collaborators joining us on these. And then with Rogue Son, we're doing just 2 covers. So it's the A cover, which is, open to order. And then we're doing a 1 in 25 B cover, but they're all homage covers that Marcelo Costa, Radiant Black co-creator, is drawing. So they all, like the first one is an homage to that famous, introducing the sensational Robin cover from I think it's Detective Comics. Yeah. And so, Marcelo has drawn that, but with the 2 Rogue Sons and everything. So that's already out there and solicited, but yeah, so those are the 2 big things right now. And then you'll start to hear more news about, we just talked on stream the other night, which we're doing more and more of on our Massiverse YouTube. In April, we're going to be doing basically a crossover between Radiant Black and Rogue Son, but not in the way that you would expect. One of the things we really, really pride ourselves on with the larger kind of universe is keeping everything really accessible. So every book is set in its own city. The characters don't typically cross over like at all, save for once a year. We do a 50-page one-shot called Supermassive, where all the characters meet and have it done in one story. If you've read the books up to that year's Supermassive, it will be additive to all the characters' story arcs, and where they're at. If you haven't read the books or some of the books, it won't matter. You'll learn everything you need to know in that single done-in-one 50-pager. Yeah. This year, though, like I said, in April, we are doing this Rogue Son Radiant Black crossover where, similarly, if you only read Radiant Black, you're not going to have to go read Rogue Son. You'll get everything you need in the Radiant Black side of it. If you only read Rogue Son, same thing. If you read them together, you will learn it will subvert some things that you thought from the other story in a pretty interesting way.
And hey, listeners, if you want a little bit more on what's coming up on Radiant Black in 2025, I would really encourage you to go over to the Massiverse YouTube channel. I think it was last week or earlier. Well, yeah, it was last week. Everybody sat down to show artwork for some new characters that are going to show up in the series, and answer questions and spill a little bit more. So you guys should go check that out if you're a huge Radiant Black fan. And if you're not, having followed this series, specifically Radiant Black, over the course of the last couple of years, 3-4 years now, this is good. If you like Invincible, you're going to want to get in on this. If you are somebody who enjoys Robin, you're going to want to get on this. This is good storytelling and good comics. And Kyle, I want to thank you for taking the time to hang out with me today and just chat things up. I've got a million more questions, but as everybody can tell, you are a super busy guy. So I don't want to monopolize you for the rest of the day. But thank you so much.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
I've placed links to the Massiverse website as well as the League short film in the show notes for this episode for you to check out. It was great to talk with Kyle Higgins about the Massiverse, but that was only the tip of the iceberg. I have a full nearly 2-hour interview with Kyle over on our Patreon page, patreon.com/major spoilers. In the interview, we talk more about his short film and how that turned into his comic book career. We talk about his time with Tom Mankiewicz, what's going on with the Radiant Black audiobook, the No One feature film, and so much more. So sign up and become a silver patron today, just like our newest patron, Googler. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. But if you want to sign up just like Goggler, you will get access to not only the complete Kyle Higgins interview, but instant access to the Major Spoilers podcast pre-show, where we talk all about the Transformers, and we get hundreds of hours of bonus material, which is exclusive only for our patrons at patreon.com/major spoilers. What are you waiting for? Sign up today for a full year and get a month free, the full Kyle Higgins interview and more waiting for you right now at patreon.com/major spoilers. All right, it is time to talk Transformers, Robots in Disguise, the first volume of the Transformers series from Skybound Entertainment. And we talked last week when we were talking about Void Rivals, how there's this surprise appearance by, who did we say it was? Jetfire shows up and he blasts off, and we find out where he goes in the second issue, I think, of this volume. But Transformers goes a little bit more harder than I expected in this.
It's interesting because so
this is so everybody knows, this is essentially a reboot of the Transformers. So you've got Spike Witwicky, and then you have the other one with cheese and the other one without cheese. Actually, you never do it without cheese.
Stop. But yeah, this book, like the 84 Transformers #1, picks up millions of years after the Ark crashes on Earth.
Yeah.
And like that story, we have the moment where somebody shows up, activates Teletran 1, and Teletran 1 starts rebuilding the people in the Ark. And it rebuilds them pretty much at random. Now, the difference between this book and the 84 is that this book isn't 80% long, wide spreads of 15 characters standing there explaining themselves and telling you what's on their file card.
Yeah.
But also there's a big firefight that busts out right in the middle of it.
Oh, yeah, because you've got Autobots and Decepticons all on the Ark. And as Matthew said, the machine is rebuilding them randomly. And in Daniel Warren Johnson, who does the writing and the art on this, the Decepticons are like sadists. Like if you thought Megatron was bad in the 80s cartoon with his voice and his laugh and everything, he doesn't show up in this series. Well, he does, but more on that later. This is just pure sadism from the go. It's like the minute that they see a human and realize that they're squishy, oh yeah, let's squish all the humans and let's make it bloody.
The first thing a revived bot does, and it's Starscream, spoilers, is murder an Autobot. Literally destroy an Autobot's skull on panel. And then we get to a point where it's clear that the sides are uneven, and it's really actually well structured because for me, I'm like, okay, well, there's 11 Autobots and there's 12 Decepticons here. But this story is like, oh, well, there's some stuff and you don't really know about the stuff. And Optimus Prime knows how to do a German suplex. And also, not only do people die, but Teletran 1 gets blown to smithereens after about 7 robots are awakened. And I'm just like, we're not even going to get the full, they didn't even wake up that guy.
Yeah, they didn't wake up a lot of people. And the other thing that, again, we do get to see Megatron, but if you are a regular of the Major Spoilers podcast, you know that he doesn't really show up until another series that we'll be looking at in about 2 weeks, where he's actually part of that world. So from the get-go, myself, I was very surprised and a little bit shocked at the extreme violence that this story has. And then also that it starts off, I think, like you do, as I said with the interview with Kyle Higgins, you start going one way and then you give us a dramatic swerve to where this is something that is not what we expected, which makes it fun. And in this case, it is, as you said, Matthew, they haven't rebuilt everybody. You've got like, what is it, like 3 versus 4 or something like that by the end of the issue, and however many make up the what is it, the Destructor or whatever, the
Devastator.
The Devastator, yeah.
Devastator is 6 guys. But yeah, and it is nice to see it's not the usual suspects either, because our Autobots, I don't want to say our Prime Autobots, but our Autobots in play are Optimus Prime, Ratchet, who I feel is high profile, but not super high profile, and Cliffjumper, which is literally like, we're going to give you the Fantastic Four. Okay.
So does Cliffjumper, is Cliffjumper the substitute for Bumblebee? Do you feel?
Cliffjumper and Bumblebee are similar. They were the ones that are super deformed. So they're the little toys. They are not the same.
With the little horns.
Yeah. Yeah, but they are the same kind of bot, and they're the same size. So when they're in
but so
form,
what I'm getting at,
people.
I guess what I'm getting at is, in the TV series and in the movies and everything, Bumblebee is the cool one. Bumblebee is the one that is friends to Sam and
Bumblebee is our friendly point of
Megan
view
Fox. Yeah. But here, Bumblebee is kind of out of the picture. He kind of got shot in the head. And so we are left with the other one. And it feels like, hey, we don't have a Bumblebee now. Here's your Bumblebee stand-in.
A little bit.
I get Cliffjumper's his own guy, though.
No, I get that. But if you look at the relationship between Cliffjumper and the girl, it feels very much.
So it is interesting, right? Because they have Optimus and Sam, right? Sam, immediately bond. And then, Cliffjumper and the girl whose name I have also forgotten is like, human characters, who cares? No. But and then they bond, right? Which it's like the problem, and like, now that you mention that, I'm like, oh, that's why they killed Bumblebee. Because in a lot of versions, Bumblebee bonds with like your human point of view character, boy character, usually Sam Witwicky. And then Optimus is this like sort of farther away figure. He's sort of like this kind of religious leader type person, or like valiant leader who is aloof of other things. So by removing Bumblebee, they allow that relationship to be directly with Optimus, which also humanizes Optimus, even though he's a big robot. But it's like seeing Optimus be sad.
Yes.
And connect to human sadness makes him a lot more of a character than he is in a lot of other stuff. Like, I've seen lots of chunks of lots of Transformers cartoons and movies and stuff, and very often Optimus just comes across as very aloof. Even if they're not trying to make him that way, his like entire concern is like Megatron and the war, and yes, keeping the Autobots alive. But you don't actually know a lot about what makes him tick. So it's like in this, they've clearly very specifically made it a point to get into Optimus's head so that, he's a character.
Let me jump back really quick. Rodrigo, what did you think of the amount of violence in this?
I thought it was okay. I think that we have moved. I am so old. Like there was a time when violence was not a thing, and then there was a time where like everything had to be ultra violent, and any reboot that you have was like absolutely like very gratuitously violent. This, I think, we're in like post grimdark. So
I guess
this has and basically when I saw this, and it's interesting, it makes sense. I was like, this is violent, like Invincible is violent.
Yes.
Like not all the time. You're not just constantly seeing guts, but the moment things go down, like somebody's getting absolutely splattered on camera against a wall.
Yeah. I mean, Optimus rips off his arm and beats a guy with it, right?
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah. You do see Bumblebee getting shot right in the head before he gets activated. You get to
a guy
see
gets crushed. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like some humans just get squished like jelly in the hands of Jetfire. You get to witness Decepticons when they're like, oh no, we don't have enough energy. And the other one is like, oh, I've still got some energy. And they're like, yes. And they just rip this guy apart on panel to get his parts and his energy. And I'm like, ooh, this is not the 80s Transformers TV show that I remember. But then at the same time, as you said, Rodrigo, they make Optimus Prime human to a point where Optimus is like, what is this squishy world? Squish. Oh no, what have I done? And he has stepped on Bambi or Bambi's mother. Take your pick. And almost like a scene out of Iron Giant, where the Iron Giant gets to see death and what death means. Suddenly Optimus Prime sees, oh no, I am responsible for killing this creature. I feel responsible for this. And I know that life now is precious. And so Optimus just has this thing that switches on in his turbo gears. And he is just like, I need to protect humanity. It was a weird moment juxtaposed against these big violent scenes where people are getting their mechanical parts ripped apart and beat to death and blowed up. And then suddenly Optimus is like, oh, no, I've seen one world die. I'm not going to let that happen here. And I thought that was a really powerful moment.
It is. And the Autobots are extremely low on resources, right? They're not the ones that end up with the Ark. So they're kind of just hiding. And Ratchet is like, hey man, like you have to conserve your energy and you can't be using the matrix of leadership and stuff because like that will drain you specifically of energy. And Optimus is like, well, if we're not protecting humans as well, right? If we don't think their lives are precious the way that our robot lives are precious, then what is the point of this whole war, right? So that's kind of his philosophy going into this, which informs a lot of like big decisions that happen and big moments that happen towards the end.
Yeah, like he rips out his own matrix and throws it on the ground. And then I'm not really sure how the matrix is supposed to work because they're running out of energy. Optimus rips out his power core. And then Sam's dad, Mr. Witwicky, steps into it and somehow he provides the energy to power everything back up.
So basically what happens is the Decepticons hit the hospital that Sam is in.
Yeah.
They knock out the power in the process. They're trying to kill everyone, but the Autobots manage to like chase them away.
Yeah.
And so Optimus uses the Matrix. I think it's the Matrix of leadership.
That's what I think it is too.
Body.
Yeah.
It's the Matrix.
And uses it to power the hospital. But that absorbs his power. That is like channeling his own spark, right? His own life force to do this, and it weakens him. Later on, when Optimus just like straight up dies, Sam's dad, because he technically made a big sacrifice to save his son, sacrifices himself to save Optimus. And he basically gets absorbed into the Matrix. I don't know why or how he knew to do that. It's all very heroic and cool and sentimental if you don't think about the logistics of like why did he think that would work.
Well, yeah. And also that, I mean, I don't know how, my experience with Transformers is basically like the toys my friend Mike had and the 80s TV show, never saw the movie. So all this stuff that has come after the 80s TV show, I'm not super familiar with it. And really all I was like, oh, that's the bad guy that turns into a gun. That's the one that turns into a boombox. That's the one that turns into a little cassette tape. Cassette tape kids, go ask your parents. So that's my vast knowledge of Transformers. So when we know that they need Energon to keep themselves alive, but are humans a power source? Is this, I mean, and other people have read further along than I have in this series, probably our listeners. Do the Decepticons realize this and start grabbing humans and shoving them into their bodies to power themselves?
Ew.
That seems creepy.
Here's the first thing you need to know, and this is a very important thing, and I think it will explain at least a little bit of this for you, Stephen, is that you cannot spell Deus Ex Machina without the matrix of leadership.
Sure.
THEMATRIX, it's in there somewhere. So the matrix has always been able to do basically what the plot requires.
Okay.
Releasing the matrix of leadership destroyed Unicron. Releasing the matrix of leadership destroyed the hate plague and brought Optimus back to life. Releasing the matrix of leadership, I think, once caused Dean Vernon to throw Delta House out of the college. And
just getting the matrix of leadership got Hot Rod to turn into like a cool guy.
Yeah.
Like, and that gave him like bigger shoulder pads and stuff.
It has always been described as holding the wisdom of the ancients, but the wisdom of the ancients in this case seems to also include the power of the ancients and also Energon, which powers Cybertronian entities, is one of those weird kind of things that never actually gets a real clear
so
explanation.
in the book
you can make Energon out of electricity.
Yeah, that's what they do here, right? They hook it up to the dam, and they're using the dam's power plants to turn their generators on and make their own Energon stuff. But I was just wondering, do the Decepticons find out about this and suddenly think humans are a power source that they can use and consume? Because that would take this book into a whole different direction and would certainly explain why G.I. Joe gets involved in all of this. That's what I was just wondering. So
that's terrible.
This really seemed to me like a one-time thing.
Okay.
I don't think they're going to be shoveling humans into the matrix of leadership.
God, I hope not.
Well, I hope not.
Yeah. So nobody here has read past the first trade then?
No, you told us we were going to be doing it for the show.
No, but I mean, you could be, because, this series is still ongoing. I thought maybe because Void Saga number 16 comes out this week. Or I'm sorry, not Void Saga, Void Rivals number 16 comes out this week.
Yeah, I wish.
And so Transformers, G.I. Joe, all those things are continuing. So I didn't know, Matthew or Rodrigo, if you had picked these up past the first 6 issues and had been reading them on release.
Here's the thing that almost escaped out of my body during the pre-show. I am tired of Transformer origin stories.
Okay.
This one was good. I think it's like the writing in this one was good. It just happened to be good. But as I was looking at it, I'm like, I'm so tired of, they wake up in the Ark and it's like, oh, the Decepticons are like, yeah, and like the teams have to like figure out a source of energy and blah blah blah. And I'm like, I've seen it so many times. Like and it's like even in Void Rivals where Jetfire is like, oh no, how long has it been? Oh no.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's where we're going with this, right? And it's like, again, I like this book. I thought the writing was good. The art is great. I like that all the suplexes and power bombs that Optimus Prime does.
Daniel does love his suplexes.
Because doesn't Daniel Warren Johnson, didn't he do one of the wrestling comics that we've read?
Yeah, I want to say he was behind the one where the girl was trying to
do a power bomb.
She was trying to win the thing to bring her mother back to life.
Yeah. He did do a power bomb. Yeah. He did do that one. Yeah, that's what I thought. So yeah, he would know all about the wrestlings.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's cool. The other thing that I think is cool is, and again, Daniel Warren Johnson is doing the art and the writing in this. When it's time to go, he nails the sound effects on the page, right? Is just really, really good. The other part is when Optimus Prime rips off his arm and starts beating people to death, there is a sound effect in the panel that says, the song. It's like, here it is. We don't have to do a sound effect. We don't have to put any words in. The song. So the sound effect isn't kapow or boom. And that's what I was wondering. Is it You've Got the Touch, or is it the Transformers opening theme song?
Oh, it's You Got the Touch.
That's what I thought. That's what I was going with. That's what I was going for with that. So yeah, that I thought was pretty clever.
What I really love is that Rodrigo made the joke about human characters.
Yeah.
The death of Sparkplug Witwicky is meant to be a big deal, because if you watched the 84 Transformers, Sparkplug and his son, who I believe his name was Spike on the show. I think
it's Spike in the show, Spike in the book, and it's Sam in the movies.
Right. And it was Buster in the original Marvel comics.
Okay.
And eventually they came up with some retcon that Spike and Buster both existed, but they were both Sparkplug sons. Anyway, Sparkplug dying, and I do use air quotes on the dying, because nobody's ever really dead. But Sparkplug dying is a moment that, if you're, let's say you're Bob Kirkman. Bob Kirkman was born in 1978. That means that when you and I were watching this, we were 12. Bob Kirkman was 6 or 7. Okay, so we're watching this. Boom, 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 boom. All these things are happening. If you're Bob Kirkman, the death of Witwicky, and I guess if you're Daniel Warren Johnson, who's the same age, the death of Sparkplug is another example of realism, because the first thing that we see in these stories, the brutality is there, especially from Starscream, but really, this is the first time I've ever seen a Transformers book deal with questions of scale. Optimus accidentally killing a creature.
Right.
Or the point where, they're like, oh my God, giant robot guys. And then Cliffjumper shows up and everybody explicitly is like, wait, is he with them? Because he's not as big. That point where you see the 30-foot robot from the human perspective, which I think is the trick. Because when we see, Starscream attacking the power facility, it's from eye level, which means you're looking up. And then he comes after one of the guys, and it's this big scene of this giant creature reaching down. All of the Transformers books previously that I had been, really sticking to, especially the Marvels, were drawn from the perspective of the robots, because the people kind of didn't matter. This is a book that, at least at the beginning, tries to give us the perspective of the military pilots, the guys on the ground, the people who do get squished, or the people who see, Optimus running around. And it's really neat. I don't know that I'd say it's unique, because I know that in 40 years of Transformers, somebody has to have done it.
Yeah.
But it's really nice to see. It kind of reminds me of, I'm sort of an aficionado of the old Ant-Man stories, but only the ones that were done from tiny Ant-Man attacking a giant egghead. So there's a bunch of them where it's like, oh, these are really great stories. Don Heck and Dick Ayers are drawing tiny Ant-Man, giant world. Everybody else would draw regular panels, tiny Ant-Man. And so having these giant creatures, and there's a scene where Skywarp attacks and he barely fits in the panel. It feels really cramped.
He looks huge.
He looks enormous. And then he drop kicks a group of people and starts just smashing buildings. It is really, really the first time that I've ever looked up and said to myself, I would be terrified of Optimus Prime.
Oh, and you should be. I mean, and when we get to meet the military veterans, and they're just all like, what is this? And they're just like, shoot whatever's moving. That I think is a real reaction that people would have if suddenly your truck decided to turn into a robot and start squishing people. I think people would legitimately freak out. And so there is another, surprise in this issue. Certainly by the time Void Rivals dropped and we knew that Transformers were part of this world, everyone was asking, when does G.I. Joe show up? And in this case, the Air Force are flying in to blow up these robots, and one of them has a special person on board, and the pilot is like, is it okay if we go and engage? And the person in the back seat is like, sure, no problem. And then, oh my God, we're going to blow up, eject. And the guy in the back seat ejects. He has some wings that pop open on the back of his jacket, and he goes flying off, and we get a close-up of the word Duke. And so now we know that G.I. Joe is part of this entire thing, which I do like, even though I think by this point, everyone knew that G.I. Joe was going to be part of this in some way, shape, or form because, spoiler alert, everybody, G.I. Joe and the Transformers in the movie universe also share the same space, and Hasbro has been pushing these two to be occupying the same space for like a decade now. So while it was nice to see that little Duke patch show up, it didn't have the gravitas that I thought it was going to have. Unlike when I read, and again, coming up, spoiler alert, the Cobra miniseries, and they had the big reveal of Megatron in that, I was like, holy crap. And then I was like, oh, okay, this makes sense. So I like that they're constantly saying, okay, we're layering this world, we're building this world, we're starting to build things out, and we want it to be a surprise of who's going to be the next guest star to show up in these comics.
And it doesn't even really feel like a guest star. To me, it feels like, hey, this is a weird shared universe. And here we're seeing the seeds of G.I. Joe. Here we're seeing this, and it feels like kind of a natural build.
Yeah, no, it's not. It doesn't feel gimmicky.
Movies, right. We don't talk about how the Marvel movies like seeded all the way through those first 4 or 5 movies to where by the time you got to Avengers, it felt earned. And that's kind of neat. Although, G.I. Joe and Transformers crossed over as early as 1985.
I'm sure. I know that there was some cartoon movie that had something in there. What didn't you guys like? Because I have one, it's not really a complaint, but one thing that I just made it harder to follow what was going on. And Daniel Warren Johnson's art is great. Okay. Whether you're showing it from a human perspective or a Transformer perspective or, whatever it is, whether somebody's getting squished or somebody's getting repaired, all the art in this is really great. My problem was in the battles. I had the same problem that people have complained about with the Transformers movies, the Michael Bay movies, where once they start fighting and you start going in for close-ups, it's hard to tell who is who. And there were a lot of times in some of the fight sequences, in some of the closer shots where I'm like, I have no idea who this is. And that part of that is because of my lack of deep knowledge of everybody's names and their shapes. I can tell you who Bumblebee is, and I can tell you who Optimus and Megatron and are, but beyond that, it's like, I don't know who Jazz is. I couldn't tell you, if he's getting beat up in this close-up or not, if that's him or whatever. So that was my big complaint was, there were many times in the panels that it was drawn to where it made it hard to figure out who was who.
That is a concern, but I think in a lot of ways it's also kind of a lesser concern for a couple of reasons. One, we see some different alt forms in this book. RC notably has.
Oh yeah, I was surprised that she showed up too.
Yeah. They bring RC in early because they don't want it to be a tailpipe fest. RC is the most prominent female Autobot. But yeah, if you actually do know Jazz, Jazz is the one voiced by.
I know who. Yes, I know who he is. But like I said, when Jazz is flipping around doing his thing, he doesn't have a unique form. Yeah, it makes it hard to tell who is who.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like each one of these guys has like a unique head, and if you don't already know it, watching that unique head get punched, you're like, I don't know who this is. This guy was literally a car the last panel. Like, I get it.
And it's a fair cop. I feel like that is a weakness of every Transformer story in that, as Stephen pointed out, when we were reading, what was it?
Void Rivals?
I think you were reading Cobra Commander.
Yeah, Cobra Commander is the one where Megatron shows up.
Right. And then all of a sudden, bam, Nemesis Enforcer. And it's played as a huge reveal. And you're like, who the heck is Nemesis Enforcer?
Yeah.
And you and I have that discussion where I'm like, oh my God, it's Nemesis Enforcer. I feel like there is a problem in Transformers in that even if you only watched the 84, that's 25 robots in those first episodes. Yeah. So you may not be able to go, okay, this is Prowl and this is Jazz and this is Wheeljack. All three of them look almost identical. The main difference is the livery on their race cars and the fact that for some reason Prowl is a police car who's also a race car. But yeah, I do agree with you on that, but I also love the fact that every police car in Sparkplug's hometown is Prowl. which is funny because Prowl is like an early 70s Datsun 280Z or a Fairlady Z, as they call them in Japan. I'm like, why do they have these classic cars? What? Where is this world?
Yeah, that's who it is.
I know, but it's cool.
It's like, well, I mean, it's like, oh, we found like this, like feels like it takes place now, but I guess there aren't actually a lot of indicators of when this takes place. Did we see anybody whip out a cell phone? Does this take place in like 1980?
I don't know what the time period is because nobody does pull out a cell phone. I'm trying to think.
Then that makes a lot more sense. It makes sense for Optimus Prime to be that like big flat semi, right?
1958.
Peterbilt.
Yeah.
Is he a Peterbilt? I don't remember.
I don't think he's a Peterbilt. He's one of those cabovers.
Yeah.
But he's literally from the 1960s.
I think he was. That's the thing is like in the movie they made him a Peterbilt.
Mm-hmm.
And
he's like the original
Kenworth 100.
Freightliner.
Yeah, he's a Peterbilt.
A Freightliner FL85. Hang on.
Oh, so the original Optimus Prime was based on the cab-over Kenworth K100. The 93 Optimus Prime was a toy based on the Kenworth truck, but didn't have a cab-over engine. Then you also have the Peterbilt 379, which was the 1992 version of Optimus Prime. And then the Western Star 5700 XE Phantom was used as Optimus Prime in the Transformers 5 movie. So there you go. I only know Optimus Prime as the cab over Kenworth.
Yeah, red cab over.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when they gave him a nose and flames in that,
I think people didn't like that
movie.
Yeah,
I didn't. That's where I washed my hands of it. I was just like, no, you are wrong.
Disgusting.
This is stupid. The Kraken.
So, did you guys enjoy this? Was this a fun read or no?
Yes, up to a point.
Okay, up to the point where
I share Rodrigo's origin fatigue. And while I really, really like some of the quote unquote realism that we have in here, the battle damage, the huge explosions, the point where, hey, look, what's going on? Where are these bad guys? Who is there? Starscream immediately murders Bumblebee, the weakest and most helpless Autobot. I also weary of every villain having to be a slavering monster. I always liked Starscream being kind of a sneaky, backstabbing, sniveling coward because it felt like it wasn't the same as, your Mumras or your Megatrons or your Skeletors. Sure. It wasn't like he's full on evil. He's greedy and stupid and just wants power all for himself. And that kind of worked for me. But on the other hand, if you look at this from a perspective of it's 2025, how much more violent, how much darker, how much more murderous and horrifying could it have gone? This is kind of, I won't say a happy medium, but it's maybe a happy 63 to 64%.
You guys.
So do you have go ahead, Rodrigo.
You guys want to hear my prediction for, if not the next, then maybe in a couple Transformers reincarnations?
Sure.
Like they've already made that movie where like Optimus and Megatron were friends. No, that part doesn't matter.
Right. That new animated movie that tells the origin. Sure.
My prediction is that within the next 10 years, a new Transformers thing is going to come out that is going to reverse the positions of the Decepticons and the Autobots.
I can see
the Decepticons are going to be the ones in charge of Cybertron, and the Autobots are going to be a small rebel band, as opposed to how it's usually played, which is there was peace and everybody was nice in Cybertron, and then the Decepticons wrecked it. They're going to do it the other way, like the giant Transformers were evil, and there was a small band of good guys that tried to stop that. So that's my prediction. Because even reading this, I was like, that's just like I feel like it's just leaving drama on the table to say that. Like, I mean, it's not. I guess a bunch of weirdo radicals taking over a government and changing everything about it. Kind of.
Yeah. I'm sure some Starscream is going to say, "My heart goes out to all of you." And yeah.
Well, and we remember last week in
prayers.
Last week in Void Rivals, though, we did have that brief look at Cybertron.
Yeah.
And it sure as heck looked like Cybertron was under the control of Shockwave, who is, traditionally a Decepticon loyalist, doesn't like Megatron, but tends to work with him. So,
yeah. So you guys have not watched Transformers 1, the new animated movie from...
I haven't seen it.
I've seen a lot about it because I watch Henry Danger on Teen Nick. So I've seen about 80% of the movie just in previews.
And like preview,
It looks interesting. And I'm not sure I'm interested in it, though.
Megatron and Optimus being friends is old school canon.
Sure.
Up to a point. Megatron, well, back when Optimus was Omega Trion or something. I think he just... What was his name? Nah, it doesn't matter. So back in the day, they were friends, and then they were later transformed. And of course, Megatron betrayed everything that he believed. Orion Pax.
Yeah. I knew that the word Pax was in there. Yeah.
Yep. Which is nice because Orion Pax.
Yeah, because everybody needs to spend some time thinking about the Roman Empire.
Well, yes.
I don't.
Rodrigo, what are your final thoughts on this?
My final thoughts is that this book was pretty good. It overcame my initial reticence of like, I've already read this story. I think just through solid writing, like I don't feel like anything that happens here is like absolutely astounding and taking the Transformers in a completely new direction. It's just solid. It's like a solid little book. It's like all of the emotional moments are earned. All of the even if you don't get all of the setups and all of the Easter eggs, they really don't bother things too much. Like there's no moment where somebody walks in and they're like, "I'm Shipwreck from G.I. Joe," and you're supposed to know who that is. Like everybody's carefully introduced or whatever. So you can just write a quality book and it'll be good enough to even to read, even if you're not necessarily looking forward to it.
Yeah. Matthew, is this a pick up, a skip, or a borrow?
If you're a Transformers fan, it's rush out in a buying frenzy. I will say this. It will, as with all the Void Rivals stuff, it will probably, I don't want to say require, but full appreciation of what else is going on will probably lead you to be buying multiple titles.
Yeah. And I think that's what they want, right? Because this is an integrated universe. Speaking of, next week we will be looking at the Duke miniseries. It seems like we saw Duke here. We might as well talk about Duke next time. I wonder who's going to show up in the Duke book that will get his own miniseries.
I wonder who it could be.
I tell you, don't run away from me. That's my
Orko.
Yes.
Wait, it's old
I'll
Snake?
get you, He-Man. That is my that's my Cobra Commander. So we've got Duke, Cobra Commander, Scarlet, and Destro still to go before we get to the first 4 issues of G.I. Joe.
I can't wait for that 4-issue Margaret Hamilton miniseries that we're going to be reading.
Yeah. Well, if we could get who's the hot lady that's part of Cobra?
The Baroness.
The Baroness.
Cynthia
Erivo. Yeah, we need to get the Baroness miniseries.
G.I. Joe, remember?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. In the G.I. Joe series, that's where she starts out. But hey, spoiler alert, that's coming up in a couple of weeks. That's where we're going to end it now. Thank you so much, everybody, for checking us out and joining us this time. Again, if you found value in the show, if you enjoyed the interview with Kyle Higgins, by all means, head over to the Patreon page, listen to the full unedited interview. It's really great, in my opinion. If you want more interviews like this, please let us know, because I have people sending me emails all the time saying, hey, you should interview Charles Soule and you should interview Cullen Bunn. And we can do all that. You got to let us know. And also, we would love for you to support us over at our Patreon page, patreon.com/major spoilers. So until next time, when we scream, I guess Duke doesn't get a scream Cobra. So until next time, remember, we know that you love comics. We do too. And we will talk with you soon.
I had the X-ray vision of a Superman, I could save a few bucks and stand around and read through the covers of the comics on the stand. But although every other page would be backwards, I suppose I could still read the evens and the odds. Well, I don't know. Guess I haven't thought this all the way through. Plus, as soon as the comic book store guy knew, they kicked my butt out on the corner. What a major spoiler. What a major spoiler. Think about a better way. If I was hulking green or gray, I could just bust through that brick wall, take their comic books away. But then the little meat would deal with all the tanks and bombs and guns. Have you ever tried to read a series with all that going on? Guess I need to rethink this plan. How would I back and board my comics with such huge hands? Guess I already told ya. What a major spoiler. What a major spoiler. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What a major spoiler. What a major spoiler. If I'm Stark Raven, rich like a man of iron, I might not be surprised to find that I might actually have the hard cold to follow an entire storyline. But would I really even need to read up on all those escapades? I mean, who needs such distractions when your sister's such a babe? But the downside is such a beast, being shot up in a fun bee in the Middle East with a gang sign throwing soldier. What a major spoiler. What a major spoiler. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What a major spoiler. Whoa, 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 whoa. What a major spoiler.
This podcast is copyright 2025 by Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC.